Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. I just heard CNN news anchor Don Lemon utter these words out loud. And I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but basically he said that eyewitness testimony isn't credible. Let me repeat that again. He said eyewitness testimony isn't credible. This dumb shit who happens to work for CNN actually disproved his own narrative, his own bullshit narrative about Michael Brown live on air and live on camera, essentially saying the friend of Michael Brown who provided the so-called evidence, even though there hasn't been a trial, no one's been to court, and the police officer hasn't had a chance to explain his side of the story yet. But again, who cares about the Constitution? Don Lemon pointing out that the narrative and that the eyewitness testimony coming from Michael Brown's friend is just total bullshit because it's not credible. Now, obviously, eyewitness accounts, at least in my opinion, are credible because, think about it for a minute, this is just common sense. They're actual eyewitnesses that saw the crime. But you see, the only reason Don Lemon is pointing this out, and CNN and the bullshit mainstream media is pointing this out, is because new evidence, the actual evidence that is emerging, is actually disproving their narrative. In fact, a friend, allegedly, of the police officer called into a radio show earlier today and alleged that Mike Brown punched the officer in the face. And there's also been evidence from another YouTube video that, by the way, has 1 million+ views right now, and I'll put the link in the description box below. Eyewitness testimony that says Mike Brown was bum rushing the police officers, which would largely explain the autopsy. Again, they say that 6 bullets entered his body, 2 to the face, and they just can't understand how a 6'4", 300-pound man could get hit with his head down. Maybe because he was potentially bum rushing the cop and was the perspective in the eyewitness account of one of the people on the ground. And also this latest report of a friend of the police officer suggesting that Mike Brown allegedly punched the officer in the face. But I had to point this out because Don Lemon of CNN actually refuted his own narrative just a few moments ago. It means that Mike Brown's friend is full of shit. And notice everything he got wrong so far. Remember how it was 10 bullets that entered Mike Brown's body, but now it just somehow shrunk to 6, and that Mike Brown was running away, although the autopsy, of which they've done 2, and now Eric Holder, Fast and Furious, has ordered a 3rd. A tertiary report has only shown that Mike Brown was shot from the face on and face forward, which means that he wasn't shot at, nor had he turned his back, or was he running away? In fact, the actual eyewitness account on the scene says that originally Mike Brown had shut and shoved the door, as he previously had shoved a store clerk just moments before after robbing a liquor store in the same neighborhood. But then had pushed the officer back into his vehicle, slammed his door, then ran away. And when the officer pulled his gun and said, "Freeze!" he came back, bum rushed him, antagonized him, potentially leading one to believe and corroborating from other eyewitnesses on the ground that Mike Brown had assaulted this officer, and the officer may have in fact, again this hasn't been proven in a court of law yet, but people like to jump to conclusions, was defending himself and felt that his body was being harmed and he was threatened, and Michael Brown had been threatening him bodily harm. But again, I just wanted to point out how much bullshit keeps on being spewed by the mainstream media. The fact that these jokers, these characters, actually refute their own bullshit narrative live on camera when it doesn't fit their agenda. When new evidence, credible evidence comes out that supports the police officer's narrative and not CNN's. But again, all of this is about race baiting. In fact, I even read an article from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar over the weekend that said this wasn't about Michael Brown. This was about class warfare and African Americans just being generally angry that they're not getting their fair share in America today. And you know what? He's probably right. And it actually makes more sense because none of this is about Michael Brown, and that's the point. It's about martial law, folks. It's about you giving up your rights. It's a divide and conquer strategy being implemented by the mainstream media. And while Americans look this way, Obama goes this way. And you slowly bleed your rights to the regime that makes up the U.S. federal government and the mainstream media bought and paid for status agenda. I'm Christopher Green. Get it out everywhere. Make it viral. Hard hitting it in your face. And click the link below to support our sponsor.